There is no voiding time, the sea of time, the sea of memory and forgetfulness, the years of promise gone and unrecoverable, of the land almost allowed to claim its better destiny, only to have that claim jumped by evildoers known all too well and taken instead and held hostage to the future we must live in now forever.
So who got her?
Department of Justice.
So, justice was served?
That's exactly right, Doc. That's exactly right.
May we trust this blessed ship is bound for some better shore, risen and redeemed, where the American fate mercifully failed to transpire.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nugentino Cinema. And today I'm joined by Diggum, and you're a friend from the Film Junk Discord. I'm very happy to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and today we're here to review Inherent Vice, Paul Thomas Anderson's 2014 adaptation of a Thomas Pynchon novel, and it stars Joaquin Phoenix and Josh Brolin and Catherine Watterson, among many others.
Yeah.
And my first question was, do you want to just give a little background on your PTA history?
Yeah, so this whole thing was kind of inspired by, I had ordered a bunch of PTA that I had never seen, which included this movie, which we eventually found out I already owned a copy of this, which was weird. It was like a classic double purchase, but yeah, and then so this conversation was kind of inspired by, I had just ordered a bunch of stuff because I had only seen before, maybe what was that, 3 weeks ago? I'd only seen Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and The Master before. I'd never seen anything else. I never gone beyond that. That was my scope for him. So I don't know. I was just really in the mood to dive into more after I think I had recently heard a discussion about Punch Drunk Love, and I kind of wanted to get back into that and kind of check out a few things. And then I ended up just buying everything. So now I own every PTA movie now, and I've seen all of them now. It turned from watching Inherent Vice for this to I'm gonna watch every PTA movie. Some of them twice. For this conversation. So that's kind of
I
where
appreciate
I'm
the
coming
commitment.
from. Yeah, of course. I want to be well read.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's not too hard of a filmography to go through because there's not too many. There's 9 movies, even though a lot of them are long. And so you do have movies that are verging on 3 hours, or some are 3 hours. But yeah, I've seen the movies. Well, I've been a fan since I was 15. I think the first one I saw all the way through was Punch Drunk Love. I remember loving that when I first saw it. But the first one that really hit me was Boogie Nights. I had a insatiable love of that.
Yeah.
And that's what got the PTA obsession going. But I remember even earlier, maybe when I was 10 or maybe 11, 12, I don't know. But seeing Magnolia, just pieces of it on TV and finding it really interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, Punch Drunk Love and Boogie Nights were the first big ones. And then I went from there. And I watched There Will Be Blood, which I didn't understand at the time. That took me a little bit. I mean, from when I was 15. But I always liked all those movies, but now it's steeped into my DNA. And the first, I saw The Master in the theater. That was the first one I saw in the theater. I saw this in the theater. I actually went to Dallas for a 35 millimeter screening of it, and I dressed up as Doc Sportello.
Oh, really?
I didn't dress up as Doc Sportello. I just had I had mutton chops. That was the only thing I did.
Yeah.
And there was actually another guy that was dressed fully as Doc Sportello. And yeah, that was a really fun screening.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I saw Phantom Thread in the theater, and of course Licorice Pizza in the theater. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan.
I don't think I've ever seen any of his movies in the theater yet.
Yeah, well, hopefully this next one,
well,
if he gets it made.
next month we do have tickets for the Alamo screening for There Will Be Blood.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be my first PTA
nice.
in the theater, which is my first PTA movie in general. Was I saw There Will Be Blood, and then I went back and saw Boogie Nights, and then saw The Master. So it's kind of all coming around full circle at this point.
Yeah, I've gotten to retroactively see some in the theater. The only ones I haven't seen in the theater now are Hard 8 and then There Will Be Blood, which There Will Be Blood seems essential to see in the theater, but I still haven't yet.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I think that'd be really good. But yeah, I got to see Boogie Nights in the same trip. I went to LA in 2021, and in that one trip, I got to see Magnolia and Boogie Nights on 35 millimeter, and that
Wow.
was pretty awesome.
Magnolia
Yeah,
would be quite the sit in a movie theater. Like,
yeah. Well, I've seen a few. Like, I mean, I think the pacing of that movie, at least in my opinion, is good. And I mean, I just watched that movie back to back the other day. Like, I watched it. Well, maybe not. It wasn't literally like I ended it and then turned it back on, but
yeah,
I watched it one night, and then the next day I watched it again. So
yeah,
I love that movie. Yeah, but yeah, I'm a super fan, obviously. But
yeah.
what are your opinions? Just initial thoughts on Inherent Vice?
It's just, when you hear coming into it, you're looking at a lot of opinions on it when people talk about it. When you say, hey, I'm gonna watch Inherent Vice, and there's a lot of opinions. There's, one of my friends, Matt, shout out Matt, he is a huge fan of this and was like, "Oh man, it's so good. But it's hard to follow. It's this, it's that." And then you get other people that I know that are like, "Oh my god, it's terrible." Like
Mhm.
because it's hard to follow, it's this, it's that. But like for me, like I just was so into we talked about a little bit in the film drunk discord about what our favorite directors are, and you said yours was PTA, or at least he's very high up there for you. For me, it's Lynch, right? Like Lynch is my
Mhm.
PTA, as I said. And
Yeah,
so I'm very accustomed to just watching a film and it being not like transactional in the way
yeah,
where it's like I give you my money and you give me answers or
yeah,
satisfaction in a story. You know what I mean? Like I'm very attuned into just the vibe can be the movie. The aesthetic can
hmm,
be the movie if you're good
for
enough
sure.
at it. And that to
Hmm,
me is this movie. It's
hmm,
the aesthetic and the vibe is the movie. And that was my definitely my first watch through cuz for this, like I said, I watched through it once straight as it will. And then I watched through it because the movie has a total weed vibe in that mindset. Just to kind of, and it's so funny. I picked up on more details on in the weed mindset, which is weird. But
hmm.
the first time through, I was more tuned into the vibe of just like it's this guy floating through all these scenarios and all these scenes and enjoying life in a
Yeah.
weird way, and just like so like that's what my initial perspective was like. It's just a great hangout movie in the same way that I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which
Yeah,
honestly they would be probably a great double feature because it's kind of
definitely.
the same thing, but it's like it's such a great hangout movie with just with these characters, and the plot doesn't matter really. Like the
Mhm.
characters what matters, and that's kind of where I came at it initially.
Yeah.
Um, so did you see this in the theater when it came out?
Yeah, I saw it multiple times in the theater. I got to see it on 35 millimeter, the first time in Dallas, and then I went to Austin and I saw it again in 70 millimeter, but it was like a 70 millimeter blow up. Um, and then I think I saw it digitally, but I saw it several times in the theater. Yeah.
Did you feel like at the time there was like a mixed reaction from the
Oh
crowd
yeah, for
as it was
sure.
being watched? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember, I mean, just immediately when it came out, it was all that stuff of like this movie is incomprehensible and you know, people just not being like not getting into it because of that. And I feel like it's probably I think it's his most underrated movie out of maybe anything he's made other than Hard Eight.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it has the most lukewarm like critical response out of all of his stuff, aside from Hard Eight maybe. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean I like the film a lot. I mean I think it definitely is like a vibe piece, and it's interesting you're talking about the weed vibes. I feel like it moves around. Like you have like the good weed vibes, but then like in the last act, you start to get like just pure like paranoia,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it kind of represents it all. And so yeah, I think it's a really good movie from that angle.
Well, it's interesting because, a lot of movies have different drug vibes, right? Where it's like there's a mushroom vibe, there's an acid vibe, there's this is totally a weed vibe movie because it doesn't go
Mhm.
so far. You know what I mean? It doesn't go so far over the edge that you're kind of in like trippy territory, but you're just
Yeah,
always in the middle, relaxed kind of zone. And that's what I think is
yeah,
interesting. That's what makes it like kind of a weed movie where it's like You're just always on the level of like in the middle of reality and fantasy and
Yeah.
kind of just like, oh, like yeah, like you're just wistfully moving between these scenes and these people talking. That's what like it's like perfect in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in the middle of reality and fantasy is a perfect way to put it because I think from Doc's character, he's sort of dipping not too much, but with the Joanna Newsom, like the narrator character, he starts to it starts to dip back and forth between stuff that is just seemingly in his mind.
Yeah.
And the sort of leash character who's played by Joanna Newsom, you see her hanging out with him and like giving him advice and stuff like this. But then there's a scene where she's in the car and it just cuts and she's not there. And it seems like she's like his conscience, or maybe not his conscience, but just something like
Yeah.
his guiding light or something like that.
It's almost like a Jiminy Cricket type vibe.
Yeah,
You
for
know?
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's also used to get like some of the Thomas Pynchon like dialogue or just prose in there, like and give the vibe of his novel
Yeah.
into the movie.
Yeah.
But I think they use her well to set up dream logic, because I think the dream logic comes back in like the last act.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Because like, not the first instance you kind of get of that, which is when he's watching the commercial and he's like,
Mhm.
"What's up, Doc?" And you're like, "What the
Yeah.
fuck is this guy doing? What is he doing? Like, what is he on? Like, but it never goes beyond that really in terms of like the dreamy logic kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just like little nuances that kind of take you there and make you question what is real and what's not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we were talking about how the actual plot isn't that important, and I agree. I mean, I think it's fun to follow along with it or try to follow along with it as it is with any noir, because I think this fits like directly into the
Yeah.
noir tradition.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's very much like The Long Goodbye, and people have said The Big Lebowski, obviously, but all those movies are trying to do a noir thing too.
Yeah.
But I think the story is important because the story isn't the plot. Like it's just like the emotional journey of Doc
Yeah.
is what gets
Absolutely.
me. And that's what makes it the most feel like a PTA movie to me. Like you obviously have the like aesthetic stuff of like the 70s and like the cinematography and like the music and all this stuff, but I think the crux of it is really like his relationship with Shasta, and
Yeah.
that really makes it feel that connects it to all of his other movies to me.
Yeah, there's a real intimacy in the scenes with the two of them that I think is really well both written and directed. Like the
Mhm.
scene where like about three-quarters of the way through the movie where she's kind of, the mystery's kind of solved in a way, and she just comes back to his apartment and is kind of flirting with him, and there's the whole thing. Like that scene is like really well, like just everything about it is great. The performances are great, the direction's great, the writing's great, and there's like a real like playful intimacy there where she's like, "Do you like Manson girls?" Like all that stuff like that, where you're like, "Oh, like it's really sensual
Mhm.
in a good way, like in a
Yeah, for
really
sure.
interesting way."
And I'd heard somebody recently talking about sex scenes that don't feel like provocative or titillating, and that just move or that are important to the story. And I feel like this is a great example of that.
Yeah,
The,
absolutely. Yeah,
the yeah, and it feels like it almost people have talked about the PTA set piece, quote unquote, because you get that a lot in Boogie Nights and his earlier films. But I think that feels kind of like a set piece. Like I don't know, it's what I remember when I think about the movie, and maybe a little bit the Adrian Precious scene where he
uh,
is attacked by Puck Beaverton and shooting the gun and whatnot. But yeah, I think there's a couple of set pieces in there. They're just not traditional set pieces.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because so like I watched the Red Letter Media review yesterday
Hmm.
because I had never seen it. Because I never seen this movie, so why would I watch it? But I just was like checking it out, and they were very negative on it. And it was the when it came out, and they were kind of like, it's nonsensical. Like I don't understand what's going on. Which I DM'd this. I was like, I don't understand that criticism because I don't think the plot is that hard to follow. Even though it's not important, I don't think it's that difficult to follow in terms of A B C D, like what leads to what. Like
Hmm.
it's really not
But I
that
think it's all
that
there for
difficult.
sure.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think if you sat down and actually laid it out, it's not that difficult to figure out. But it's like it's I don't know. It's more important to key into what else is going on as opposed to what's going on in each individual scene, because like there are those set pieces that are really interesting. Like there's a shot that I wrote down that I liked where it's like when he gets to what is it Chick Planet, and
Yeah,
there's a shot that he's walking and there's all those flags in the background, all
that's
those like
definitely a good
flags
shot.
on a
Yeah.
string, and it's like
Mhm.
that set piece is so interesting. There's like it's like these little mobile homes and these flags on a string. Like that is enough to keep me clued in for the next 15 minutes of the movie. Like you put that in front of me and I'm in for like the next little portion, you know. And it just
Yeah.
constantly is doing things like that. And then it's like the scene after that and the scene after that, you know. Like that's what's
Mhm.
important to this film,
Yeah,
not,
for sure.
you know, everything lining up.
Yeah, definitely. And like I love the set design of it, and like I think PTA has a knack for, well, and his crew obviously has a knack for recreating the 70s in a way that feels authentic. I mean, I've never lived in the 70s, but from watching documentaries and whatever, like I get the vibe. His 70s movies feel more authentic to me than anything like American Hustle or something like that, where it feels
Yeah.
completely phony.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because his 370 movies, 70s movies are this,
Mhm.
Boogie Nights, Licorice Pizza.
Yeah.
And they're different portrayals of the time period, which I think is really interesting. Because one is like Boogie Nights, you get the excess of the 70s, you get
Yeah.
the party. Licorice Pizza feels the most like reserved in terms of like what it probably was actually like for like a normal person,
Yeah.
which is why I
For sure.
kind of like really adore it. But then like this is kind of like post Manson, anti hippie, direct the beginning of the 70s, which I think is really interesting. Paranoid
Well,
Los
yeah.
Angeles, you
It's
know.
got a lot of the 60s and the after effects of the 60s for sure. And that's where it connects to, it would make a great double feature with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You have a lot of the same, like the Manson stuff's there. That's also Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. They, even just for like little things, they have KHJ playing in the background. It's pretty subtle in this movie, but they do have the same like Robert W. Morgan, the same kind of stuff they play in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of connections there. I remember hearing about this book when they were first announcing that they were going to make the movie, and I was hoping it was going to be um, like an actual 60s period piece. And it's set in 1970s, so it's technically the 70s, but it
Yeah.
is dealing with a lot of the stuff from the 60s for sure.
What's the fallout? It's the post hippie world, right? Because it's like it's
Mhm.
almost like Doc in this world because you have Bigfoot and the people like him, and you know Mickey and that kind of thing, and it's like you are those people are coming on. They're on the upswing, and the hippies are on the
Mhm.
downswing, and he's almost like a relic in a way, even though it's only been like a year since the '60s. He's like a
Yeah.
weird relic where everybody's like, "You hippie doper," which, by the way, I
Yeah.
love the word doper. It's so amazing to call somebody a doper, but it's like
Yeah.
they're like, you know, as frowned upon as they were in that period, they were the subculture in the
Mhm.
60s, but now it's like they're like some weird even fringer subculture, which is like it's a total shift from the like 60s free love thing where,
Yeah.
you know, there's just scenes of him getting his ass kicked by cops and just getting pushed over, and it feels like that's like a post Manson hippie thing where it's like, oh,
Yeah,
like
definitely.
these scumbags, you know, like
Yeah, and I think this movie, well, one, it mixes tones in a lot of different interesting ways because there's some more like melancholy, like sadness in it. Like I think it's dealing with like disappointment of the hippie culture, like not working out. I think that's there, but there's also, they mix it with like this like Mad Magazine kind of almost like airplane kind of comedy vibe
yeah,
like throughout.
yeah,
And
totally.
there's great like physical comedy, like the him getting hit over the head with the hammer and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I think it's really interesting.
I mean, the
um
like slow shot of Bigfoot, um, like when he comes out of the wife's house and he's like picking him up and like all the
yeah.
kind, it's so funny. Like it is
Yeah.
hilarious. Like it is like so like just the like slow motion ass kicking is funny. Even though, to borrow a term from a previous PTA movie, Bigfoot is a pig fuck. You
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
it's funny. It's still funny.
Well, I think there's an interesting comparison there between The Master and this. I think the sort of relationship between Joaquin Phoenix's character and Philip Seymour Hoffman in that, it's different here, but I think there's a similar vibe between Josh Brolin and Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
Just in like them kind of clashing, like two totally different, ideals or ways of living, but then there's them sort of like coming to this weird understanding at the very last scene, and like Josh Brolin's resisting it, but they have this kind of like weird connection.
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, that's there in a big way in The Master. And I think they do it a little bit here too.
Yeah, because I rewatched. So before I rewatched this again on edibles, I watched The Master the night before. I rewatched the Master the night before because I was like, let me watch what he made right before, and then we'll jump into this. And yeah, that definitely carries over in terms of like this like weird relationship between these two people. And
Mhm.
Philip Seymour Hoffman is sorely missed in this movie because like oh my
Yeah,
god, if he was somebody in this, it would be incredible. But it's just one of those things where watching these two back to back, it's weird because they couldn't be more different movies, but they're
hmm
also similar in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Where it's like, you got the same star, but then it's like there's these relationships that are very similar. You got a lot of the same actors, but it's like the vibe couldn't be more different in terms of
yeah,
between the two of them, and that's super fast. And even after this, because I watched Phantom Thread twice, and it couldn't be
hmm
more different from this to that even. Like
yeah,
I don't think there could be a bigger difference in any way between those two movies. He's such an eclectic filmmaker that this is maybe the strangest movie in this whole filmography because it's so unlike
yeah.
everything else.
Well, I think it's the most he's ever dealt with plot, even though it's like a different kind of plot. It's not like traditional plot,
Yeah.
and it's plot that is hard to understand for most people. But I think he's doing it in interesting. Like I think the noir, like confusing labyrinth plot, like helps create like an interesting surreal atmosphere. And it also, I mean, this has been said by many people, but like you're going through it, like Doc is going through it. He's confused, and
Yeah.
we're all confused. So
Yeah.
that definitely is a thing. But another thing, like you were talking about how it's so different from movie to movie. And this movie, the Johnny Greenwood score is in one part or throughout most of it, it's sort of like trying to do like a noodling, like guitar, like 70s or
Totally.
60s kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
But then there's parts where it dips into stuff that kind of sounds like The Master in certain scenes.
Yeah.
And I thought
Totally.
that was
Yeah. Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's because it has like in parts it'll have a jam band kind of vibe, like a total like hippie kind of vibe. But
Yeah,
then you said that it's more traditional, the mastery kind of thing. And that, even if you look at it, like that could be the hippie 60s battling against the like sort of like we started to get into the more straight laced cocaine 70s kind of deal. Like kind of
yeah,
because like 70s was when the straight laced suburbia kind of really comes into effect, like like in America. So it's like kind of like battling between those two sides, and Doc is doing that as well, is where he's like kind of like um so this the score is representing those two things, and I think that's really I mean, it's not my favorite score in a PTA movie. That's still probably Punk Drunk Love, because that one is
yeah,
phenomenal, but it's a really great score for sure.
yeah. It is great. I love all of his scores. My favorite score, Punch Drunk Love's up there. I'm saying purely score, like negating soundtrack.
Yeah.
Um, I think Magnolia might be my favorite PTA
Really
score
interesting.
because it's
Yeah,
so
yeah.
operatic, and like there's scenes, there's like a whole 30-minute chunk in the middle that is just
Yes.
carried so hard by the score.
Yeah, I know exactly what
And
you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think that's my favorite score. But this one, in terms of soundtracks, like Boogie Nights is an amazing soundtrack, and I think the
Yeah.
soundtrack here is pretty good.
Yeah, the soundtrack here is great. Like a lot of really great songs that kind of like perfectly tune into the vibe that it's going for. There's
Mhm.
one I've tried to I can't remember right now. There's one particular track that was really really effective, but I can't remember it at the moment. But it was like really really good
Mhm.
towards the end of the film. That I just was like, this is perfect.
Was it the very last song?
I think it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Any Day Now, I think by Chuck
Yes.
something. I forget his name.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah, I love that song too. I remember that really like just like blowing me away when I saw it for the first time in the
Yeah.
theater. But there's a quote I wrote down.
You have a
And
couple
this
written
quote is
down.
already this one has always stuck with me. You can always cruise, or you can only cruise the boulevards of regret so far. Then you've got to get back on the freeway again.
Yeah.
And that one hits me. I was like, he's like stuck in this like place of he can't let go of Shasta.
Yeah.
It's almost like in a weird way, like an eternal sunshine of the spotless mind kind of thing. Not as extreme as that, but like I feel like at the end of it, like well, to go into the last, and I don't know how you interpret it, but I feel like in the sex scene, I feel like he's imagining that she's there. I don't think she's really
Oh,
there.
really? Okay. Yeah. 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 I thought it was literal for sure in my head,
Mhm.
but I could
And it
see it
could
being
be.
either way, to be honest.
Yeah. And I feel like by the end of the movie, he's learned to keep her in his heart, like in a positive way. And and I feel like that the scene, like when it fades out from him with it fades out from him with Josh Brolin into them in the car, and they're like cruising, and I feel like it's them doing that quote literally. Like he's with Shasta on the boulevards of regret, but he's getting on the freeway and moving on with her, but still having her with him in some way, even though she's gone. So I think that's really beautiful. I don't know how many people interpret it like that, but yeah, that's how I feel about it.
I mean, I could see it going either way, really. You know what I mean? Like he's not in the headspace to really be like a reliable narrator. So like it
Yeah.
really could be like either direction. So like, I interpret it both times as literal, but that's because the way my brain works or whatever. And it's like, but yeah, I could totally see it being either way.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's you were talking about your favorite director being or what like being Lynch, and I feel like he's using Lynch stuff. He doesn't so much in his earlier films, but I feel like starting with The Master, he starts to use some of that stuff, and
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. I've never heard him talk about Lynch, but I think it's there.
I totally see a lot of like Inland Empire in this in a way, in the sense that it's
Mhm.
just scenes of people talking and like this like mystery that's not really a mystery and just you're just floating from scene to another. I see a lot of that in here for sure, where it's
Yeah.
it's not really important what is literally happening. Like
Mhm.
it's more important just to live in the moment with these characters. Like the like the scene that I think is maybe the most inconsequential that but I think is really good is the one with him and Belladonna from
Yeah.
other things on the internet. Uh
Well, she delivers that quote that I gave, so I think
yeah.
it's a kind of an important moment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and that scene is like really good, but it's also kind of like super superfluous in terms of like the plot, but it's like
Yeah.
they're doing laughing gas, which I think is hilarious or whatever. Like
Yeah.
it's and they're like
He hits
trading
on
back
her
and
and she
forth.
slaps him.
Yeah, yeah, I love all that stuff where it's like super like it doesn't really matter, but it's like it's so good that it matters.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not like I think a lot of the times people come into movies like this and think that it has to be, like I said, a transactional thing where it's like, here's my $10 and from it I get a story. And it's like that's not always how it is or should be. Like,
Well, the
like you
story's
can
there. It's just not like everything else you're gonna see. It's not like a
yeah,
prepackaged, the same thing as everything else.
yeah, exactly. And
Um,
it's just like, it you live in these moments and if you really just live in them, if you really settle in to the dirt of these moments, like it's an incredible watch.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, I think all of his movies have that feel. I mean, especially he starts to get to it more and more with his later films. Like I think in his earlier films, they were more straightforward. There wasn't like
Yeah.
a lot of surreal stuff there. They were still like reaching for big heights cinematically, but like there just wasn't this sort of surreal experiential thing going on. But I think he does that a lot now. Um, yeah, but to just talk about some of the performances, I thought, I mean, obviously Joaquin Phoenix is really great. I think
Always, yeah.
he delivers like just like a really sweet, like loving performance. Like he just seems like such a nice guy, and it's interesting like watching Beau is Afraid like recently, like how
Yeah.
different he is.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Beau can be a sweet like character, but like in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And
It's a naive
yeah,
sweet.
yeah, and Yeah, he's amazing. But I think everybody, Josh Brolin's amazing. I
Yeah,
think it's one of my favorite performances of his.
yeah. The pig fuck.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. And the cameo from Martin Short, I think, is really good.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
just having him there is awesome.
He delivers one of the best lines. It's not groovy to be insane,
No,
which
I
is
love
so
that line.
good. It's
I've
I
always
mean
loved that line.
that scene because so I was so I'm a big Red Letter Media fan. Like I said, I watched the review, and they were like they really complained about the way the movie was shot, which I don't really have an
Hmm.
issue with. But they were like every scene was shot terribly except for the Martin Short scene.
Yeah, I
But
don't agree with that, but
I don't agree with it, but it's like that scene is great because it's like really weird and like tense, and they're like snorting some stuff, and I'm like, what is going
yeah, they're
on?
going for
Like,
like cocaine energy a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah,
they're like speeding up the camera, and then they're having these weird shots where they come into the car and like the car door is like slamming, and like everybody just kind of looks on edge.
yeah.
And yeah, but I like how that scene goes directly from him being with Martin Short to then the next scene, Josh Brolin telling Joaquin that he was killed by somebody. He had like fang marks on his neck and
Oh
died on a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
trampoline.
I love those scenes when he's calling him and he's like, he's being really vague with his language. Like when he calls
Yeah,
her the first time and he's like, she's gone. And
yeah,
he's like,
yeah,
what do you mean? She's dead? Like no, she's disappeared. He's like, well, can you be a little more? It's the same thing where he's like, oh, he's made his last root canal or whatever, and it's like, what does that mean, dude? Like stop being
yeah.
weird. Like
Well, I love the
it's
scene
so
on the
good.
phone. Like those are great scenes. But I love the scene on the phone too, where his wife, Bigfoot's wife, just like
Oh
reams
yeah,
out Doc,
you totally
and
like demasculates him.
yeah, and but then like Josh Brolin is just sitting there with like this like smile on his face. It's like I don't know, I just love it.
Yeah,
And then he's like, he called me. Like I don't know what to tell you, but I love that. I love that scene.
yeah. Well, I love that she knows who Doc is.
Yeah. Well, he's like a big part of Bigfoot's life apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But another person, I don't know that I would say his performance is amazing. I mean, I think his performance is good. He's just kind of himself. But Owen Wilson,
Oh
I
yeah,
love having him there. I love having
yeah.
him. I think he adds to the movie, and his whole role is a big part of the heart of the movie too. Like, I love the idea that the only way he feels like he can make any of this make sense or get something out of it or make it right in some way is by helping Owen Wilson's character get back to his family. I think that's a really
Yeah.
good ending.
Yeah, and it's it has like maybe the most prominent line in the movie when they talk about he's like, you know what the Indians say when you
Yeah,
save a life, and he's like, no, dude, that's some hippie, just some shit a hippie made up. You saved your life, now go live it.
yeah.
Like that's one of the most important lines I think in the whole thing. Like it's like
Mhm.
really kind of wraps things up in an interesting way or like in a really clear way. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it gives it all a really good,
And you see him in a
clear.
bucket hat, which is great.
Yeah, he looks like Animal from the
Yeah, he
Muppets.
does. I love the first time you see him is he walks out of the fog in a bucket hat, and I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Like this is exactly what I wanted.
Well, saying the movie was shot terribly, like from Red Letter Media, like I don't understand anybody could say that. It seems like where they're in the fog, like it just looks so amazing.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's a great scene.
yeah,
And
and
they talk about the fog from the Oriental indica they were smoking and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. Like,
yeah, another person who's in the movie who's not in it too much, but I think is good in it is Benicio del Toro, and I love how he's in love with the boat, Golden Fang,
yeah,
and they have a good scene where they drink tequila zombies, which is something I was fascinated with for a while. I'd always go to a bar and try to get a tequila zombie,
yeah,
and but yeah, I love the vibe of that scene where they're at the restaurant
yeah.
and
And
he's talking
what's
about the
her name?
Howard Hughes stuff.
Jillian.
Oh, Jillian Bell
Yeah,
from she's in
she's the
Workaholics.
server in the scene.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
one of the guys from Workaholics is the cop that pulls them over.
Oh, really? I didn't even
Yeah,
notice.
I don't know which one it is. It's not
Yeah,
Adam Devine. It's one of the other guys,
yeah, yeah,
but he looks very different. So it's hard to recognize him. But yeah, there's a few weird little cameos like that. But one thing related to the whole like in the scene with Benicio del Toro when they're talking about Howard Hughes and like trying to get people on the Vegas Strip. There's a scene where Mickey Wolfman, because Mickey Wolfman is they're using Mickey Wolfman to get on the Vegas Strip or whatever, and there was a picture where they showed his hotel and then like cutting the ribbon or whatever, and the name of his hotel was Kismet, which I felt like
Oh, really?
maybe meant something.
Yeah. Totally. No, definitely.
Yeah, and that's the
I
first
see
time
that.
I've noticed that on this watch. Because before, I don't think I knew what Kismet meant, honestly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, there's definitely something there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got a great vibe. Another thing I wanted to talk about is just people have always called Pynchon novels like unadaptable, and I've heard a lot, and that was another thing people criticized when the movie came out was just like long scenes of people talking, just like going on. People felt like it was uncinematic, but I feel like there's a lot of cinematic stuff going on. I mean, they're combining the two. Like they definitely are trying to integrate like Pynchon's prose, for lack of a better term, in
Yeah.
there. But I thought a really good scene that captured two things, like the literary stuff and the cinematic stuff, was when Joaquin Phoenix and Owen Wilson are talking at the table, and he's telling him like, "You got to find Shasta Fe," and there's this like guy like pacing in the background,
Yeah.
and it adds to the paranoia. But they're giving this like big monologue, or not monologue but duet scene. Um, but I think it mixes both of those things in there really well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, like there's a lot of things that because I was messaging with somebody who had read a lot of Pynchon when I was like talking about stuff, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's a Pynchon line. Like that's like like it feels like a lot of that comes directly from him in terms of like the really clever lines that I love. Like the one that I have written down says, like Godzilla says to Mothra, man, let's go eat
Yeah,
someplace." And I'm like, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's directly from Pynchon," like stuff like that, where it's like like a really weird different way of looking at things or talking about things, and like you said, like talking about this, and there's like some just dude pacing in the background, like adding to the tension of this scene. That scene I like a lot too, where they're like, I love when he comes up and he's like, "Oh yeah, that car that you asked me about," and then like, "Oh, like with like any replacement parts," like like it's
yeah,
so good. Like I don't know, it's just written so well that it's like super entertaining. It's
mhm.
a really quotable movie. This movie, like you could pull so many things out of it and be like, oh, like that's hilarious.
Yeah, for sure. I also love when Owen Wilson's talking about like, if your mom was on Smack, like, wouldn't you help her? And like, but he's
Yeah,
comparing America to somebody's mom.
yeah,
He's because of
yeah.
the whole Vietnam thing, and
He's like,
he's
are you
like,
saying America's somebody's mom?
yeah,
Yeah,
I love that stuff.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's thought provoking in a way, but it's also funny, and I think it's a pretty good way to sum up the entire movie.
yeah,
Um, yeah, but it's a weird movie because I've always gone back and forth on like 4.5 and 5 with it.
yeah,
Because I feel like maybe it doesn't execute things like absolutely perfectly, but who's to say that it should? Like it is perfect in its own weird way to me. Like at this point, like I've seen it so many times. I don't see a point where I'll just stop watching it. I'm sure I'll see it again many
yeah,
more
totally.
times. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a fantastic movie. It's still probably in the lower echelon of PTA movies for me. It's not at the bottom, but I still think it's great.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking at my notes too to talk of things I talk about. It's at the Godzilla Mothra. I love when the phone call he makes to, despite watching it twice, I don't know who that woman is that he calls that is like doing her makeup.
Oh, that's like his aunt who helps him.
Yeah. I love when she talks about talking to the cops, and she says he may be better off with the Nazis. I feel like that's a
Yeah,
great dig and a funny
yeah,
moment in the movie. Like there's a lot of that weird like cop sentiment in there that I really enjoy. I always love an anti-cop movie, but like, um in particular this movie kind of plays with the dynamics where they talk about how Doc kind of he always respected the partner relationship, and then when he finds out that, Bigfoot's partner was like a part of a LAPD hit, like it kind of like shakes out
yeah,
a little bit. Like I think that's really interesting. But that I love that his office isn't an actual doctor's office,
Yeah.
even though he's not technically a doctor. I think that's
They're
hilarious.
giving like vitamin B12 shots or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Well,
yeah,
there's a part where he walks by the doctor and he says doctor, and the doctor says doctor to him, but
yeah,
that's fucking hilarious.
yeah, that's awesome.
um,
I do find the Bigfoot relationship with his cop partner interesting. It seems to explain why he's so like kind of unhinged because his
yeah,
partner died. But they also, I think they're implying some weird sort of homoerotic thing going on in the
with the
banana scene.
bananas, yes.
Yes,
Oh, there's definitely
yes,
something with the bananas for sure. Because I was like, there's the first scene where he's doing it, and he's just like so like he's going to town on that thing, and not just eating it, going to town. He is like
yeah,
sensually eating this banana like you've never seen a banana eaten, maybe. Like it's
yeah, for
crazy,
sure.
which is
And that's one of the
hilarious,
best
but
parts
it's
of the
also
movie.
great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah,
they're like driving, and it's just that side profile, and he is just like going nuts. I think he literally gags on it at one point because it's so
yeah,
far in
he
his
does.
mouth that it's like, whoa, buddy, like it's just a bit much. Like,
Yeah. I remember I saw it in the theater the second time, or maybe it was the third time, but it was when I saw it at the Alamo Draft House on 70 millimeter, and they served a dinner that was like they had a moto panakeku platter,
yes,
and they gave frozen bananas, and so I was sucking on a frozen banana as he was sucking, um, and then they had like Doc's pizza or something, but the pancakes and the banana were pretty amazing to have actually during the movie.
oh yeah, definitely. Like the Moto Panakeku scene is so funny,
Yeah,
especially when you think about it compared to Licorice Pizza, the Japanese scenes in that. There's a
yeah,
really
I thought
weird
about that.
overlap with those two. Like especially watching them being like, there's a weird overlap between these two things.
I remember thinking during the, I think it is more, there's more stuff going on in the licorice pizza thing, but I remember when that whole controversy was going on, I was thinking back to the one in Inherent Vice and just thinking like nobody ever brought this up as anything bad.
Yeah,
but
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but it was different times. It was 2014, but yeah. I'm trying to think if I have any more notes.
I'm looking at mine too. I have fucking-ing. I love that
Yeah,
part when he's like fucking-ing. Like
yeah.
like that's hilarious. I had some weird note. It says Martin Short Voorhees Kruger. I don't know what the
That has
fuck
to be
that was.
something, but
Well,
it's weird because it would have been before Voorhees Kruger existed.
yeah, well, I'm like, is it a reference to that? It has to be,
Yeah.
right? Like, 'cause it's like
But
weird to
how do you
pair
put those two things together and not be a
without it being,
reference?
yeah, yeah. So it's like things like that. I have the line Jimmy Wong Howe did it for us years ago because I thought that was hilarious when the wife says,
Mhm.
when it says that. I don't know why it just struck me. Do you like the lighting? And he goes, uh-huh. Jimmy
Yeah.
Wong Howe did it for us years ago. I don't know. I thought that was hilarious. And the like delivery was so funny.
Well, I love
Uh
Joaquin's like little like enunciations of lines, like
oh yeah.
in that scene where the lose the she like leans over and puts her bud in his face, and he's like again. I can't even like
Yeah.
describe it, but
Yeah.
that scene's
Oh,
awesome.
and
There's a scene
I
towards the beginning where he's stuttering a lot, but yeah.
yeah.
What were you saying?
Well, I have also photo scream is goaded on here as well when he screams at the photo of the baby.
Oh yeah, that's one of the great like moments. Yeah,
Oh my
for
god,
sure.
it's so fucking. I rewound it probably 3 times when I watched it the first time because I was like, wait, what the fuck is that? Because he just picks it up and just fucking screams and then just goes back to uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just so
That's
like
awesome.
perfect. It's a perfect comedic beat
Yeah.
of just like a moment of like absurdness and then going back to normal, like, oh yeah, totally.
That one does help reading the book a little bit. Not that it's still there in the movie, but and I haven't read the whole book. I've just read chunks of it. But
Yeah.
there's a part where it's that part where he looks at the photo, but it's described as like he looks at a photo and then it's a baby who's like completely malnourished and like messed up from heroin,
Yeah.
and it like freaks him out and he screams. But they don't like they say that that's happening, but like you, it just kind of goes by quickly and it just plays as a comedic beat rather than like something really messed up that he's looking
Yeah,
at.
totally. Yeah.
Um, and that was another thing that was interesting. That Jenna Malone's like teeth, her fake teeth. and then that connecting
You
to the
like my
whole
choppers? Yeah.
yeah, and that connecting to the whole Golden Fang thing where they're selling these dentists are selling heroin so that they can mess with people's teeth and make money.
Well, it's like a triple sided process, right? Where it's like they
Mhm.
like sell them heroin,
Yeah,
they have to get their teeth fixed, and then they go to them to get cured from the addiction. It's like
yeah,
this
and
really
then
weird three-step
yeah,
process, like, that is really interesting. It was interesting because I listened to a bunch of interviews about the movie with PTA and Joaquin Phoenix and stuff like that because I wanted to kind of dive more into what their mindset was making this. And the Joaquin Phoenix stuff is a little less interesting because he is kind of it seems like he lives in the character for the moment, and then beyond that is like I don't know, like what do you want me to
yeah,
say? Like
exactly.
like
Yeah,
because like somebody even asked him like, oh, what was on the photo that you? He's like, it was like just some Polaroid of something. I don't know. I don't even remember. I just screamed, you know.
yeah,
But I thought it was interesting when they were talking about how the idea of the movie is that they're kind of like in this post Manson conspiracy era where everything that is weird or wrong has to come back to some conspiracy that is like related to something that has a reason, right? Even like it plays with it in some ways where, Coy's wife is like, my husband's not dead. There has to be a conspiracy, but
yeah,
she turns out to be correct.
yeah,
But then even some of the other stuff where it's like with the Golden Fang and stuff like that, it's like where you're playing into this conspiracy mindset, and it may or may not be 100% correct or true, but it's like there's some elements in there that are real and not, and it's like this whole paranoid LA conspiracy Manson vibe that is like really throughout the film is really interesting when you think about that aspect of it.
yeah,
More so than just like riding the vibe, but it's like there's like really just a wave of there has to be a reason for these things
yeah,
happening, but there
mhm,
doesn't necessarily even have to be, but you're just looking for them.
yeah,
And I think that's a lot of what the movie is tackling in a way is it's like there has to be a reason Shasta is gone. There really isn't.
yeah.
She just
It's
is
just that
gone.
she left. She just left. It's
Yeah.
her own thing.
It's a lot of these people looking for, and I think Lynch does this a lot too. But there's a lot of people looking for answers for things that have none
Mhm.
in this movie, and that's what I think the movie is trying to say in a lot of ways is that there aren't always answers to these questions you have.
Yeah, like there's not always answers, but you got to get back on the freeway and move on with your life.
Yeah, yeah, you got to get on the freeway. You can't live on the regret conspiracy highway for forever.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
got to
definitely.
sometimes just merge onto the freeway of like I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And just get like some little kernel of goodness out of it, like the whole, what he does with Owen Wilson's character at the end.
Yeah,
But you got to find some way to move on for sure. But I think there's like you can compare because I feel like there's I was talking like earlier about the yearning for something lost, and I feel like that's there in a double sided like the losing of the free love thing and the hippie culture. It feels like the government is coming back in and trying to take hold in whatever the way they can,
yeah,
and that's something that's going on with the movie. But it's also just the yearning for a lost ex girlfriend and a lost relationship, and so I think it's interesting how it kind of mirrors those two things.
yeah. Because there's like the hippie culture. There's a lot of race stuff in this movie in terms of like the FBI coming in, their anti-black nationalist movements and all that stuff like that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
loss of like sort of tightening up in American culture on those things. Like we just had the
Hmm.
civil rights movement,
Hmm.
and it's a big deal, and now we're kind of retightening up on that again. Even like like Bigfoot even says like I just came back from making a bunch of civil rights violations, like
Yeah.
like stuff like that, where it's like like kind of like we're moving slowly towards the Reagan era, right? Like we're moving
Yeah.
slowly towards conservative America again after this hippie revolt.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, this movie is about the death of that
For sure. Yeah.
culture, you know,
Hmm.
and
It's
back into
interesting.
conservative America.
Yeah, definitely. They have some of the like Red Scare stuff in there too. Like that's more
Yeah.
like the 50s, but the whole Burke Stodger character, he's not in the movie, but he's talked about a lot. They go to the mental institution and like there's this Burke Stodger marathon happening, and I think he was supposed to be, from what I've read, what's that guy's name? Sterling Hayden. He was supposed to be like an allusion to Sterling Hayden, the guy that named names, and then he was actually in the Long Goodbye. Weirdly enough, but yeah, there's a lot of layers of political stuff going on in the movie for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of allusions to communism in general, which I think is interesting, and or like socialist leftist movements that are being silenced or sequestered in some way, and the things along with the racial stuff that's layered in there as well in terms of like we're post Manson now, we're post hippie, and then we're gonna clamp down on all this shit.
Yeah,
We're moving into the 70s where it's excess and white collar and leisure suits and cocaine, and we're getting rid of
yeah,
these fucking hippies and they're dope and they're fucking free love and everybody gets everything. Like we're getting rid of that shit now, and we're gonna move
yeah,
into the 70s, into the 80s kind of thing. Like so, like there's totally that
yeah,
vibe in there, which is beyond the emotional beats of the story, which are the best part. There's an interesting sublayer of that in
for
there.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, in terms of the socialism stuff, I think one of my favorite lines, maybe not my favorite line, but it's just funny, is when the guy at the end is telling him like people like you like lose respect anytime you pay rent or the first time you pay rent. I think that's a good like line.
Yeah.
But
No, totally. Yeah.
I love that whole scene at the dinner at the end there. Yeah, I think that scene is really good.
Yeah, no, where they're just it's just him and that lawyer guy talking. Yeah, no, that scene, it was so funny. Like the first time that scene didn't really hit me that much, but the second
Mhm.
time when I was on, the weed, that's when it really like affected me when I watched it. I really was like, whoa, like this is some deep stuff going on here, like
Yeah,
between these two
for sure.
guys. You have this like relic of the hippie era and this kind of like almost like a decade too early Reaganite lawyer
Yeah,
really beefing it out with each other and kind of like predicting how the world's going to go in a way, like what the next decade's going to show for each of them, and it's really interesting.
he does that. You can see that prediction the way the world is going to go, and that's kind of the sadness of it. But it's also awesome because like that scene is where Doc like accomplishes his goal and
Yeah.
gets Coy out of the system that he's in.
Well, it's
But
really interesting because he basically gets the opportunity for money
yeah,
and kind of forgoes that in favor of getting Coy out of the system that he's
yeah,
in, which is a
yeah,
very noble thing to do.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, yeah, but talking about it, I just like it more and more. It's still, if I had to rank PTA movies, I won't go through like a whole ranking, but my favorite is probably The Master.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I say,
this is
would you,
probably. Oh, go ahead.
if we're at that point, would you mind? I've kept my PTA ranking a secret.
Yeah,
Would you mind if I unveiled it here
for sure. I'd be
on this
honored.
very show on Nugentino Cinema? I've been asked about it. Okay, I've had people asking me, and I said I will unveil it at the right time.
Right.
And after
Oh
doing it
yeah,
over the last couple of weeks, it's here. If
nice.
we're at that point in the conversation, you feel like
No, we definitely. Yeah, I think we are.
okay. Number 9, because I have 9 ranked here. These are 9 features.
Yeah, 9 films,
You would say
feature
okay.
films.
Number 9 is Magnolia.
Nice.
Is that shocking?
A little bit. I'm surprised that Hard Eight is above it.
Well, like we talk a lot about dropping tier.
Mhm.
I feel like this movie tried really, really hard to get me to drop tier, but I couldn't even squeeze it out of it
Yeah.
because like there are emotional scenes in it, but like we've talked about the Julianne Moore performance is a big turnoff for me because I think it's so bad.
Well, it's funny because you're a big fan of Nicolas Cage.
I am, yeah. We get he's like the king of huge performances, but to
Yeah,
me it just came off as like really annoying and bad. Like in this.
I can see what you mean, but there's a part of me that like enjoys it in the same way I would enjoy a weird Nicolas Cage performance. Like I
Yeah.
just laugh at her deliveries of
Yeah.
lines, but like I don't just truly laugh at her. There's other scenes where I feel like a lot of empathy for her character, but there's other scenes where I'm just laughing. But I can see how it would be annoying, but I don't mind it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it could be a thing that it was a first watch for me. So
Mhm.
it could be a thing that grows on me because, like performances like that can grow. I think John C. Reilly is really great in it, actually. I think John C. Reilly is like plays one of the best cops I've ever seen in a movie, to be honest
For
with you.
sure.
Like
Yeah.
realistic, real cop. Like he's so
He's a
good at
cop who's trying to do decent, which I think is
yeah,
touching.
yeah, 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 absolutely. And so at number 8, fittingly, is Hard 8.
It's
I
perfect.
I think I DM'd you about this saying like I was not sure about it. Then 40 minutes in, I was way in. I was way in the
Mhm.
movie, and I was like, okay. And then it honestly kind of falters once it gets into kind of like Tarantino territory,
Yeah.
like when there's guns
Some of the
and
Samuel L. Jackson, coming in
hitmen.
and
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It kind of gets a little less exciting. I was kind of more into just Gwyneth Paltrow, Sydney, and John all being together
Yeah.
and just enjoying life together. That was kind of the movie I wanted out of that. But
I still think not to interject too much, but
no,
I think like with the more typical crime movie stuff in the later half, I still think it's interesting because Sydney is like fighting for his family or his not imaginary, but his found family.
yeah, totally.
Um, and he's fighting from them being taken away by Samuel L. Jackson revealing things that would make them not like
Yeah,
him. But
which yeah, which of course, I didn't notice this until I listened to the shout out Film Junk Premium PTA podcast that
yeah,
he says the names of the same actors characters in
oh
both
yeah,
Magnolia and Boogie Nights, which I think is really interesting. Like I heard
both
it
played
from
by Philip Baker Hall.
yeah, 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 all three played by Philip Baker Hall, which I think is great. Um, at number 7, I have Punch Drunk Love.
Nice.
We're really preloading the early PTA at the bottom part of the list. But
That's
it's
interesting.
I really enjoy all of these. Like they're all enjoyable. But like yeah, Punk Drunk Love this is my favorite score.
Mhm.
Great performances from everybody and a really weird cast. But yeah, just a little on the lower end for me because it it's shorter, which is great. Like it's only
Yeah,
like 90 minutes, which gives it a lot of credit. But like um, it just doesn't hit as hard as the others. And then at number 6, I have this is gonna be another shocker. Are you ready? Number
I'm ready.
6,
Yep.
Boogie Nights.
I was kind of expecting it to be lower. Yeah.
Which is at a 4.5 for me, so I really like it, but it's just it's a little long.
Yeah.
Everybody's really good in it. I talked about how I dropped tear during it.
Mhm.
And I think every movie from here forward, I probably dropped tear during. So that's a credit to it, to all
Right.
these. But yeah, it's just its portrayal of the '70s. I think we had talked about it, the excess culture. I kind of was like into it, but I also am kind of like, yeah, like I get it. Like, it's people being excessive and, but like I said, I cried during that scene when Burt Reynolds is walking through the house at the end, the found family thing, like in Hard Eight.
For
I
sure.
feel like he really tackled that early on and then never kind of came back to it, but it's really effective in this movie.
Yeah.
Number 5, Licorice Pizza.
Nice.
My favorite of his, well, actually, not my favorite, but I think it's a great portrayal of the '70s. I really like the coming of age aspect in the '70s. I think it's really interesting, and like we were literally just talking about it. The scene in the end when they run towards each other, and then
Yeah.
flashes back to all the running. I was like fucking crying my eyes out because it was so well made, and I like the hangout nature of it. It's less serious than everything that came before it at this point. It has a hangout, less serious vibe, and I kind of adore that about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much not like too serious throughout. I wouldn't say it's serious at the end, but at the end there's some drama that really starts to kick in,
Yeah,
and I think it's really well done.
I mean,
And
they're
honestly,
just but
I was going to say it's one of his most emotional, maybe not the most emotional, but it hits me really hard, like that final 20 minutes. Like not just the running, but the whole scene with Benny Safdie
Yeah.
and his boyfriend and Alana at that table, and
Yeah.
then the scene with her and the boyfriend, like him talking to him in front of the apartment, and that sort of like like leading to the realization about like Gary's character, and then you have the running, and I think that's such an amazing ending.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's beautiful. It's just like super like emotional, and like I said, it's a well lived in. It's a film you live in for its
yeah,
runtime. You're immersed in the world, and you're kind of living with all these characters, which is why I think it's so good. Um, age gap aside, who gives a fuck about that? It's a tired fucking topic. Um, Number 4, Phantom Thread.
nice. It
Loved,
is. It's a good one.
loved this movie. Like I watched it
Mhm.
twice. Great performances from everybody. Really beautiful film about the passion of artists and
Right.
the art that they make and what it means to them and what it can mean to other people. Like so beautiful. Like no matter what kind of art you make, I think there's a value to be found in watching this movie because it's just in the same way, you know what, that American movie, if you're an
Yeah.
artist, you can find value in watching a movie about an artist. The
Yeah.
same thing to me where it's like it's a beautiful portrait of somebody creating something, and Daniel Day-Lewis's final performance for
Yeah.
now.
Presumably.
Yeah,
I
presumably.
think there's a good chance though that it could be his final performance because
Yeah,
he's in his 60s, and that's kind of an age where people retire anyway, and I could see him just
being
chilling
done.
and not
Yeah,
and being
yeah,
done. Yeah.
yeah.
So if it is his final performance, it's a great one. And I wanted to say, like, I agree with you about the art stuff and it being a sort of interesting look at another kind of art, and something I kind of find comparable. I mean, you made a great comparison with American movie, but also Slacker.
Totally.
I
Yeah,
think
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, that movie has a weird sort of thing about like making like life your art. It's like anything can be art
Yeah,
if you approach it in a certain way. But yeah, I love that element of Phantom Thread. I also love the relationship there. And I feel like it's kind of just like finding like the flaws within your partner, but like making them work somehow. I mean, the whole ending and the twist of that is so
yeah,
strange, but I think it has really interesting ideas behind it.
yeah. And I've never said this in the Discord, but it should be
Mhm.
noted that I adore Slacker. Slacker is one of my favorite movies.
It's one of my I love it too. It's a
It's my
5 for me.
favorite Linklater movie for sure.
Same here.
I
Yeah.
love I love that and you have so many Kevin Smith turned me onto that, so thank you,
Yeah.
Kevin Smith. Uh,
I got to see it like 2 years ago at the Paramount Theater in Austin with Richard Linklater there, like
okay, yeah.
hosting it.
Yeah,
And a lot of the cast like brought back talking about the movie. So that was a pretty amazing
that's sick.
experience.
Yeah, 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 that's absolutely great. That's fucking amazing. Number 3, Inherent Vice.
Nice. That's pretty
Really
high
high
up.
up. Really high
Yeah.
up for me. Like I said, I love the vibe of it. I love Joaquin and just like living in this world, this paranoid, weird world of like there's
Yeah.
secret ships and fucking Owen Wilson's got a bucket hat. I mean, we just talked about it for forever, so I won't go on forever with that. But that's number 3.
Mhm.
So there's only 2 left.
I'm
Number
trying
2,
to. Okay, well, I know one. Okay, now I know them both.
yeah, because number 2 we used to be my number 1,
Mhm.
but it's swapped now, and number 2 is there will be blood.
Okay. Right.
Which it could swap once I see it in the theater next month. You know, it could
Yeah.
could totally change the thing. But yeah, that's number 2. I mean, it's probably the first PTA movie I saw,
Yeah.
and it was only because I had heard about Daniel Day Lewis being so amazing in it that I was like, I gotta check this out. I guess there's this amazing performance in it. I'm a fucking what year is that? 2017.
2007.
2007. That's what I meant. 2007. Jesus. I'm old. So yeah, so I'm a sophomore in high school probably, and I'm really into
Yeah.
film. And it's
Mhm.
like people talk about, oh my god, this guy is so amazing in this movie. So I go see it, and it blows me
Right.
away.
Yeah.
Um, and to this day, it still does. I rewatched it as part of this whole discussion thing, and it still fucking blows me away so much that I'm gonna go see it again in the theater next month. You know, like
Nice.
it just
That's exciting.
is. It just it doesn't even need to be explained anymore. Like it's just so good. And then number one's The Master.
Nice. And that's my favorite as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a brand new swap because it's just Hoffman and Phoenix are so good. They're
Mhm.
so fucking good. Like I was watching it last night or Monday night, and I was just bawling my eyes out when he starts singing Slow Mo
Slow
to
Mo to China.
China. And I
Yeah.
just was like, "Oh my god, this is so
Yeah.
fucking
It's
fucked
an
up!"
amazing
Like,
moment.
yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible.
I have to say, like, I don't know if I've ever shown you this, or you probably saw it on the Discord, but I'll just share it with the viewers.
Yeah,
But I have a
I think
master
I've seen it.
tattoo,
Yeah,
and
you
it's
do.
the ink blot, and then you got
Yeah,
like Joaquin's eye coming out that side, and then
that's
Philip Seymour
sick.
Hoffman coming out of that side.
Yeah, I love
But
that.
that's how dedicated I am to that movie.
To the
I
master.
seared it into my skin.
It's your
Yeah,
master.
yeah, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
masterpiece. Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I'm reformatting my top 100 by keeping that close to the vest. Let me
Okay.
tell you, that's in the top 15 now. Is the
Yeah.
master?
Well, for the longest time, it's been my number one movie of all time,
Really?
and
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
and that could just be that it just felt like it was a formative moment for me. Like when I first saw that in the theater, it felt like because I already loved Boogie Nights and I loved all these films that I had seen of PTA. I had high expectations, but it didn't like it met my expectations and more, even still.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And there's not too many other movie experiences I can think of that are like that. And I'm lucky I got to see it at the Alamo Drafthouse Ritz, where I also saw the 70 millimeter version of Inherent Vice. I finally got to see the Master in 70 millimeter in like 2020, like right before the pandemic. Um, and it was a long time coming because I didn't get to see it back when it came out. Well, not in 70 millimeter. I saw it digitally, but but that was right before that theater shut down. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, and now it's Joe Rogan's comedy mothership.
Oh God. Don't even start me on that. But yeah, like as cliche as it is, that processing scene is like, oh my God, like
No,
it's
it's
a scene
amazing.
like everybody should aspire to. Like
Yeah,
even through the flashback, like that's the entire thing.
yeah,
The beginning of it when they drink the booze to when they get up from the chairs and leave is what every filmmaker should aspire to create with their movie.
exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Another scene that I find amazing, and I remember this being like a crazy moment in the theater where I was just like blown away. Was the from the window to the wall moment, which I feel like has a similar editing structure. But just that like Philip Seymour Hoffman kind of like going through this process with him, from him going back and forth from the window to the wall, and him flashing back to these different moments throughout his life. I thought that
Yeah.
scene was incredible,
I love when he
and I
starts
love the
doing
music there.
the like war flashbacks when he's like fucking like barbed wire. Like, you know, he's
Yeah,
like going back. I like, oh, it's so good. When I was
yeah.
rewatching it Monday, I was like, oh my God, this part is so good. Like,
I think we have that movie to thank for Joaquin Phoenix's like continued amazing career. I think that's the movie that like
yeah,
really
absolutely. Yeah.
got people to see that he was an incredible actor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
100%. Yeah.
Because
Cause it feels like after that is when he started doing really artsy, out there things. And that's why I think he's been so good so far.
yeah, and it was coming right after I'm Still Here, which was the one where he went crazy, well, quote unquote. It was kind of a reality experiment,
Yeah. It was that
and
kind of weird fake doc thing.
yeah, and I just listened to an interview where he was talking about how like after that movie came out, like he literally wasn't like getting any offers, like he really did fuck himself up,
Yeah.
and only because people didn't understand the whole idea of that movie at all, and they really thought that he was that character because that's just how people are. But he said he was about to do like a really terrible movie because he just wanted to work. And just as he was about to like do that, he got the offer for the master. So he was able to do that instead, and he was able to go in a great direction. But yeah,
Yeah. That's awesome.
Mhm. I think that's pretty much all I've got. Did you have any other thoughts on PTA or Inherent Vice?
No, that was it. Just my list, my notes. That was about it.
All right, cool. Well, thanks again for being here. Just to reiterate, I would give it a 5. It's a 5 for you as well.
It's a 5 for me as well. Yeah. It's 5 stars.
But yeah, thanks for being here. And yeah, I think it was a great conversation. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.